This is one of the targets that have been bombed during the last war in Gaza Strip and during the continuous aggression against Gaza. Hundreds of people that have been injured and thousands of people that have been evacuated their homes due to the huge shelling by airstrike and tanks strike. We would like and we ask all of the people around the world to support human aid intervention in Gaza Strip, especially in the medical field and livelihood field, by providing the evacuated families by food bags and bedding bags and other needs, in addition to work to shelter them in safe place with their children. As I said to you, that the situation here is so critical. We are trying from more than 3 to 4 days to go out and photo this aggression and the result that have been made by the severe airstrike. Thank you for your attention.
Allah says, "Whosoever saves a life, saves the whole of mankind." Human Aid UK has been working across Gaza for several years, running programs to alleviate the suffering as the conflict continues. Our ambulances are on the front line, delivering patients from the real-time crisis to the doctors and nurses which we support. We now need your help to further alleviate the medical crisis by providing life-saving medical aid to 2 of Gaza's largest hospitals. Thousands of people in Gaza are facing one of the most challenging times yet. We urgently need your help to ease their suffering and continue saving lives. The people of Gaza are counting on you. Will you save a life this Ramadan? Donate now. Human Aid UK, bringing hope to life.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome viewers to this very special event this evening to discuss the situation of our brothers and sisters around Gaza. My name is Fahad Sari. I'm a solicitor by trade, and I'm here hosting today's event with Human Aid UK, one of the most excellent charities in the UK at the moment, working on causes of the Ummah all over the world, and particularly in Gaza. We have a number of special guests today to talk about Gaza in a very unique way, a way that doesn't really come across in a lot of the media reports we see on a daily basis. We know that over 230 people have been killed in Gaza, including 65 children, in the past few weeks. What we don't hear is the stories of these people, the people of Gaza, their courage, their bravery, their resilience in the face of 73 years of occupation and aggression. Today we hope with our guests who all have an experience of Gaza and of visiting Gaza to humanize those statistics, to give them life in a way that the Israelis are seeking to take it away from them. So we have a number of special guests today. We are joined by Brother Nouri Chowdhury, who is the chair of Human Aid UK and one of the founding members. We have Jamala Shayal, a just a journalist with Al Jazeera. You will have seen him on the news frequently, particularly this week, discussing the attacks on the media in Gaza. We have Sabir Hussain, who is a solicitor in the UK and an advisor to the charity Human Aid UK. We'll be joined by Majid Freeman, a human rights activist and charity worker, later on in the show as well. So if I could say welcome to all of you, Assalamu alaikum, and thank you for joining us. Brother Noor, if I could start with you. You are the chair of Human Aid UK, and it was founded 11 years ago. Could you please give us an indication of why you decided to establish the charity? What was the motivating factor?
Assalamu alaikum rahmatullah. Interestingly enough, Human Aid really started from Gaza. Gaza was the main rallying call for those of us who did start off the charity. And this really kicked off from when Operation Cast Lid took place. Thereafter, we felt an obligation to do whatever possible to support our brothers and sisters who are suffering in Gaza. And during that process, alhamdulillah, a lot of the brothers, those who were involved from Human Aid, did manage to travel to Gaza in those years. And eventually it came to a point where it led to the formation and the creation of the charity. And just prior to the official creation of it, we had been providing ambulances and medical aid to Gaza in 2008, 2009. And then it was in 2010 that eventually, early of 2010, that Human Aid was then established. And its primary project was actually in Gaza. And that kind of led on directly in the following month to the first kind of trip, you could say, or the first delegation Human Aid took as a charity, which was actually on the flotilla itself, heading kind of towards Gaza.
Jazakallah. I'm going to come back to you about this flotilla because our next guest, Jamal Al-Shial, who is a prominent journalist with Al Jazeera, but was also, I think, a guest on that flotilla. Jamal, welcome to the show.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullah. Thanks for having me.
Jamal, can you give us an idea of, as a journalist covering several conflicts around the world, I've got two questions really. The first one is, traditionally, how have you seen the media coverage of the Palestine conflict compared to other conflicts that you've covered?
I mean, it's no secret that, the coverage of the occupation of Palestine and the sequential wars that Israel has waged either on those living inside Palestine or on Lebanon or other countries in the region, the coverage has always been skewed, or at least for the past few decades. Let's say we growing up, I remember from the very early days, even when I was, a young child, the first Intifada, and seeing what was happening in the early 90s, and then growing up later as a teenager, and then seeing what was happening in the second Intifada al-Aqsa of 2000, 2001. And then, the massacres that happened in Jenin and so forth. All of these, we would follow the news from either directly from people that we knew on the ground in Palestine, or you would follow it, for example, later on after 1996 from Al Jazeera Arabic. And then you would go and switch on to the, News at 10 or Newsnight or other outlets in the UK, and it would be completely two different narratives, right? So one narrative was, that the Palestinians were terrorists that wanted to kill peace-loving Israelis because they didn't like the way they lived, or they didn't, they just didn't like them, which never actually really added up to anything. And anybody who wanted to take just a step away to actually question that narrative could very easily take it apart and dissect it. And the other was a very clear narrative of a land that was stolen by colonialists who not only stole the land, but continued to oppress and ultimately drive out those from the land as much as they could en masse. So whether it was drive them out forcibly as refugees into neighboring countries, or whether it was to drive them out by essentially massacring them. It was actually one of the reasons what drove me into journalism was the fact that I was fed up of how skewed this reporting was. Coming back to today and this current war that is taking place, we see very clearly that there is a shift. There is a shift in the way it is. Part of that shift, I believe, is due to the way in which media is being reported now in terms of how instant it is and it's at your hands, right? So through tools of digital platforms, social media, and so forth, almost everybody can be a journalist, so to speak, or at least citizen journalism makes information a lot more accessible, so long as obviously internet is not cut off, and most likely it will be cut off, or there have been attempts for it to be cut off in many of these conflicts. But part of it is also because, alhamdulillah, over the past 10 years, we've seen more and more people from a different background want to take control of the narrative, wanted to reclaim the narrative, right? So I've seen a mixture of people, from friends and colleagues who've gone into journalism, have done tremendous work, and because they understand the stories that they're reporting on, that has helped from it. And partly, I think, is that there is a sunnah as a believer. I have a conviction that nothing stays the same forever, right? And there's no oppression that lasts forever. So it could very well be in the hikmah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that the time has come for these things to change.
I mean, when you touched about the journalism and the two narratives, when I sort of first got my flavor of Palestine was when I was the Al-Aqsa Intifada, and I was in the United States at the time when that kicked off. In Chicago, I was there for a year, and there's a very strong Palestinian community there, and a very strong Zionist community, and it was incredible the different narratives that were being. If I had not the internet, I think I would have been lost as to what was going on, because what I was hearing from people on the ground, the Palestinians, about telling their stories of their families, and then watching the news and reading the newspapers is completely different. It's only then when I go on the internet that would be corroborated by what you'd been reading in other press. And what I found really striking was the Israeli press, Haaretz and other Israeli newspapers. They were actually more truthful than the American press in terms of reporting what was happening. I don't know if you share that.
I think a big part of that is because of the clear awareness of your audience and how much you can get away with it. So as far as, for example, Haaretz and others are concerned, a lot of people will constantly praise and point to a liberal movement within, or a left of center movement within Israel. I think that's all relative. In the end of the day, there's only so liberal you can be as an occupier, as a Zionist, or somebody who believes in occupation, and that's not very liberal in and of itself. But they understand that there's only so much they can lie to their audience about or change, because the audience lives on the reality, right? So they will see the checkpoints themselves, they will see the apartheid wall, they will see the difference and so forth. Whereas the audience in the United States, much of which has never traveled, not least to the Middle East, and is not aware of it, has a very peculiar relationship with reality and fact, as we've seen with particularly those to the right of center of society who supported Donald Trump and believed in much of what his propaganda was. There's a lot more scope for you to be more adventurous and imaginative in the way in which you report things. So it's only natural that you would and could very easily, change the narrative 180 degrees.
That's the point about trying to get away with, you're trying to report what you can get away with. Do you think that's in play in the UK as well, that because we've had more citizen journalists and more social media reports about the actualities of what's happening in Palestine, that Sky News and others now realize that, we can't just sell a complete lie anymore. We have to actually report what's happening. Or is it a sense that people are feeling just more empathy for the Palestinians?
I think it's more of the former than the latter. The latter does exist, but I think it does include everything. And I think there is a concept, by the way, of those who are parallel to injustice, or at least sponsors of injustice, or at least the beneficiaries, let's say, of an injustice, where they may not necessarily be ideologically married to that injustice. However, they benefit from it. The United Kingdom, let's say, although there's an argument to be had that actually it is ideologically behind it, but let's say the establishment just benefits from the fact of having a settler colonialist kind of presence in the Arab and Muslim world through Israel, they will continue supporting it until it becomes unattainable. And what I mean by that is, if you look at, for example, the support that was given from the United Kingdom to apartheid in South Africa, it wasn't suddenly that the UK grew a conscience, at least the UK establishments, political establishments, military establishments, and economic business. What it was you could no longer hide it. You could no longer hide it because at the time, the mass media was being presented by, yes, there was some in terms of TVs and newspapers and so forth, but also through iconic popular figures, right, in terms of pop culture and so forth, who then amplified the voice of the oppressed indigenous South Africans and their plight against and fight for liberation against the settler colonialists there in terms of the white man in South Africa. Now, what you're having in terms of amplifying that voice is through social media, is through those digital platforms, and also through mainstream popular figures. We're seeing it from Paul Pogba of Manchester United. We're seeing it through the brother playing for Leicester City, Chowdhury, I believe. We saw it through Freddie Kanute, and it's building up, right? You see it even through fashion icons, Bella Hadid and so forth. You see it through Mark Ruffalo from Hollywood, across the board. It's mainstream. And here, and I'd like to hear, obviously, I'm sure from a legal perspective, some of the discussions and from the other guys, participants here, is that one of the greatest things, I believe, or the most interesting things about this current war that's taking place now, or this current chapter in the decades-long occupation, is not necessarily the sympathy that you're seeing that's going there. Because yes, it's good to have sympathy, but that's not the most important thing. For me, it is the change in narrative of what is taking place. And by that, I mean, I remember at university, I went to SOAS, and we would discuss, issues about Palestine and solutions and so forth. And my conviction was that occupation is wrong. It doesn't matter if it happened before 1967 or after 1967. Illegal occupation is illegal occupation. If you steal somebody's house before 5 o'clock, it's the same as if you stole it at 5:30. It makes no difference whatsoever. So the idea that was being presented as a two-state solution for me was a joke. What was more just was a one-state solution that guaranteed the rights of everybody, regardless of their faith, race, and so forth. That at the time, people laughed and said, you are a fringe. Right now, what you're seeing played out live is that the concept and the belief in a one-state solution, where there is equality amongst all and no discrimination, that has become mainstream. And the fallacy that you could have a two-state solution has been destroyed. That, for me, is a lot more significant, that shift. And we're going to see it become more and more mainstream over the next few years. And ultimately, it is down that path leads you to the end of the Zionist occupation.
Yeah, I completely agree. I remember those discussions at uni myself with the one state, and we were a fringe at the time. And ironically, again, it was a lot of the support for that solution came from sort of people like Ilan Pape and others who were pushing this one state business, but and the rabbis from the Neturei Kartai. But again, everyone is seen as a fringe. But the reality on the ground is the two-state is dead. It's impossible to actually implement, even if they wanted to. So there is only one solution to this, is a one-state. But just going back to the charity work for a moment, Nouri, I'm going to come to see Sagir for the legal stuff in a moment. But Nouri, can you tell me, I mean, Jamal talked about an overall solution to the conflict is obviously the end of the occupation in its entirety and a one-state solution. As a charity, you're obviously limited what you can say politically, but how do you see a solution for the people in Gaza in the short term, in terms of what you, as a charity, you can carry on delivering food aid, food packs, rebuilding infrastructure? How long is that going to go on? It's a bigger idea you're looking at the moment.
Yeah, definitely. I think the concept that we tend to have within human aid is that there's only so much you can do by putting a plaster over a bullet wound until you actually address the source of the wound itself. So it's important that we actually start addressing what is the cause of of these issues, and this is the main thing that we need to get to. The only way you're going to actually get long-lasting stability, long-lasting peace, long-lasting change in the humanitarian field is that we address the problems, the root problems, and actually tackle them. So in the short term, the issue with Gaza here is quite simple. It's very straightforward. There's a humanitarian crisis that's happening there, which has led, and we've heard the famous kind of saying, which is that Gaza is the world's largest open air prison. And the only way you can change that is by the complete lifting of the blockade upon Gaza. The naval blockade, the one by air, the one by land across Israel, and also from the crossing into Egypt. So until this is lifted, you cannot change the situation in Gaza. And so that is always been, and that will be our first and foremost call, that needs to end. And then moving on to that point as well, so Brother Vahid, which is that also.
No,
Go ahead.
I do. I interrupted you. Is you mentioned this blockade, naval and land blockade. A lot of people who have been, woken up by recent events will probably not know anything about a blockade. It's something as going on for many, many years. But could you give some background to when this blockade began and what it means? I mean, going beyond just terminology, in real life events, what does that blockade mean for the people in Gaza?
Well, the blockade effectively started after Israel had actually withdrawn its settlements from Gaza. And then eventually, when the whole the politics came into play, where you had Hamas coming into power, and thereafter, the blockade was effectively enacted from that point onwards. Exactly, I can't remember. I think it's 2008, I believe, if I'm correct, when that started from, or 2007.
2006, actually.
There we go. So even from that point, and what that blockade means, if you look at the blockade, is the land is completely sealed off. There's no entry, no exit. Anything that is being provided in terms of materials, there's no building materials allowed to go in. So while Gaza gets bombed, it can't get rebuilt. Then you're talking about food supplies and medicine supplies. Even the control of the electricity going in, these are all controlled effectively by the Israelis. When you look at the naval blockade, you've got ships that are so close to the shores of Gaza that the fishermen can't even fish. Meaning, because if you go fishing, fish don't come close to the shore. You have to go a certain distance out. If a Gazan fisherman try to go to reach the point where they can get the fish, you've got the naval ships, the Israeli naval ships, that shoot at them, prevent them from doing that. So it's a total starvation of this. That's why it's called largest open air prison, because they can't get in, they can't get out. They're restricted in what they do have, and so it's just keeping this population completely in desperation, in need, in weakness, where they can't grow, where they can't sustain themselves. And then you just can imagine the continual bombardment that we're seeing right now, and the total destruction to property, to even to like I said recently, and I'm sure Brother Jamal will talk about it as well, in terms of the Al Jazeera the building where Al Jazeera and AP were, so even to the media outlets, and even the destruction to the hospitals. And we know the complete bombardment that they've been has been landing in Gaza, and Human Aid who've been supporting Al Shifa, the largest hospital in Gaza, for a number of years. The main road leading to Gaza has got a massive crater into it, again preventing citizens to be able to get access to medical treatment. So the blockade is really effectively, that's what it's doing. It's completely strangling, it's starving, and it's killing off the civilians, the people within Gaza.
I think that context is really, really important, because one of the myths that the Israeli cheerleaders always push out is that, look, you talk about liberating Palestine, we liberated Gaza, we left Gaza, we left it to the Palestinians, and they've made a mess of it. They've got Hamas in charge, they've got democracy, they've destroyed the country, and Hamas is the problem. Whereas when you put that in the context of a blockade where the Israelis are the one controlling the electricity, the water supply, the air, the fishing rights, everything, and nothing come in and out, it sort of puts a different spin on it completely. I mean, the fact that I read a tweet early on that the Palestinians who are being called refugees because they're fleeing, there's actually nowhere for them to flee. The bombs are falling and there's nowhere for them to go. And that in itself is quite shocking. But what about Egypt's role in this? Because obviously Israel is one part of the border, the other border is with Egypt. Are you doing anything in terms of trying to open the Egyptian end?
Yep. So with the Egyptian end, one of the things I mentioned before, when we started, just before that, there was a good momentum that started. And if those who remember the Viva Palestina kind of convoys that were going, trying to break the blockade that was there by Egypt at the time, enforced by Mubarak. And alhamdulillah, you know, several convoys did manage to get in, and a lot of those who are with Human Aid did manage to get in at that time. And then, then came the attempt, we'll talk about it later, about via sea to kind of enter as well. But then when you had Morsi in position, the borders were a bit more easier in terms of to get access to. But then when Sisi came in, you know, the situation went back to normal. It is a very difficult situation. You know, alhamdulillah, we have been able to go through on numerous occasions into Gaza. And inshallah, we're hopeful very soon, within, hopefully once the bombing kind of eases, inshallah, when it does stop, then there'll be an opportunity for us to enter. So hopefully within the next few weeks, we'll get an opportunity to go in and to be able to go into the ground and assess and then see the situation there for ourselves and provide them that direct support. But we have been able to facilitate, alhamdulillah, nevertheless, a lot of support by providing ambulances and other medical aid via Egypt. But Egypt is also a key player in upholding this blockade, and we have to call it out as it is. While we may be looking at the Israelis and their impact, there is one element of the border with Gaza that is obviously via Egypt, the Rafah crossing, and they're the one who are enforcing and upholding this blockade. So they too rightly should be called out for.
Okay. Get some legal perspectives on this now. Is Sagir still with us? Assalamu alaikum, Sagir.
Assalamu alaikum, sorry, I'm back.
Sagir, I know you got some connection issues, so hopefully you'll stay with us for the question anyway. Charities like Human Aid and others, they face a lot of problems when they work in certain war zones. From a legal perspective, what kind of regulatory and legal challenges do Human Aid face working in somewhere like Gaza?
Gaza is particularly important, and if you give me a couple of minutes, I'll give you a background to this. There was a case called the Holy Land Foundation case in America over 10 years ago. And what the Israelis have been trying to establish there is that anybody who helps the people of Gaza is considered to be indirectly helping Hamas. Hamas is to be punished because it won't do what the Fatah faction in West Bank will do, which is to basically accept Israeli demands. And as a result, this is why the siege is taking place, because Gaza won't unconditionally accept what the Israelis want. And because due to that political conflict, a medieval siege has been allowed to continue in Gaza for many, many years. And due to Israeli political, media, and diplomatic power, this is not that well known. And this is why people like Jamal, people like Noor, people who have had the courage to grow on a flotilla have started to expose the siege. And that's why the world found out more about it. So in that context, Holy Land Foundation was trying to help people in Gaza, and people were actually convicted of criminal offenses in America and equated with helping terrorism. So that's the kind of legal context. So in this country, as we know, unfortunately, the Charity Commission itself got influenced by people who are like William Shawcross, who have been very close to the Israeli lobby, very close to the thinking of the Israeli government. And therefore, there was a conflict within the humanitarian sector in this country. And as a result, people who work in Gaza have had obstacles placed in their way. But having said all that, the regulator also has to operate within the law. And as we know, the regulator, most of the people, obviously, they want to be fair and they want to operate within the law. And Mr. William Shawcross himself is gone because simply his politics was unacceptable. And I imagine his position became untenable because the charity sector and the principles behind humanitarian relief were just not acceptable to have him as a regulator. So he's gone. Therefore, going back to the need and the imperative to continue the humanitarian work in Gaza. Now, the humanitarian law, the humanitarian principles are that where there's suffering, you should be allowed to take aid and help there. And as we know, the British government's foreign policy is very much in line with Israeli foreign policy. And therefore, there may be some pressure on the regulator to implement the British government's foreign policy, but that's in conflict with humanitarian law principles. So we have these kind of conflicts going on all the time, but I can say with certainty that if the Charity Commission, if any regulator, for anybody tries to stop a regulated humanitarian worker from operating in Gaza, they would be breaking the law. They will be operating outside the powers that the law has given to them. So therefore, it's very important for organizations like Human Aid and other organizations, obviously follow all their obligations as trustees, obviously comply with the regulatory laws and the well-established principles that are involved about risks and other to the charity and to the people who work in there. But it's very important that they do not allow political or foreign policy priorities to take over the need to help people who are really, really, really suffering at hands of the fourth strongest military in the world. So yes, I think work there. If anybody follow the legal principles, make sure you're aware of all the risks involved with working with in Gaza, but nobody under English law can stop you from working there.
So just to clarify then, what you mentioned at the beginning about the situation in America, where the whole foundation were accused of helping Hamas by helping the people in Gaza, that is not the law in this country. In this country, there's nothing to, it's not a crime to be supporting Human Aid's work in Gaza, for example, or any other charity that's working in Gaza.
We will, and I do, criticize the UK laws and the way the system is operating. But one thing I have to make clear, that you are absolutely, there's no problem with helping, doing humanitarian work in Gaza. And it's a noble, heroic, and an important legal principle, even under secular humanitarian laws, irrespective of the Islamic principles involved.
Okay, brilliant. Okay, so just to remind viewers, you can call in the number 020863885575. It's on the screen. Actually, it changes 020812345507. If we're really looking for people who've been to Gaza, we'd really like to hear your experiences about traveling there, how you found the people. You can call in, you can put your comments on Facebook and YouTube, or live at both. But I think for now, we're just going to break to have a short video. So we'll be right back after this video.
This is one of the targets that have been bombed during the last war in Gaza Strip and during the continuous aggression against Gaza. Hundreds of people that have been injured and thousands of people that have been evacuated their homes due to the huge shelling by airstrike and tanks strike. We would like and we ask all of the people around the world to support human aid intervention in Gaza Strip, especially in the medical field and livelihood field, by providing the evacuated families by food bags and bedding bags and other needs, in addition to work to shelter them in safe place with their children. As I said to you, that the situation here is so critical. We are trying from more than 3 to 4 days to go out and photo this aggression and the result that have been made by the severe airstrike. Thank you for your attention.
So as you heard from the Sagir Hussain, the lawyer, there's absolutely not a crime to contribute to Human Aid, to donate towards the amazing work that they're doing in Gaza. So we ask everyone to please contribute and donate generously. I know people tend to suffer from donor fatigue after Ramadan, but the reality is this is the need of the moment. We need to carry on where we left off in Ramadan and increase in our efforts and not decrease. A sign, the ulama say, that your deeds in Ramadan are accepted, that Allah enables you and blesses you to carry on doing those deeds and increasing them after Ramadan. So please do donate generously. Nouri, I want to come to you because a lot has been, we've heard the word flotilla mentioned several times, and I think a lot of viewers may not remember that incident, what happened, but could you explain what was flotilla and what were you aiming to do, and how did it all end up? Did you actually get into Gaza?
Well, I'm sure as Jamal will know as well, he could attest to it. It's quite a long story, but I'll try to be succinct within a couple of minutes. The Gaza Freedom Flotilla, as it was called, was a fleet of ships looking to sail into Gaza directly via international waters into Gazan waters in order to deliver aid as well as building materials. And so there were altogether, I believe, about 6 ships, majority of which were carrying cargo. And prior to that, what was happening was there was a lot of land convoys taking place to break the land kind of blockade. And this was via sea to try and break the naval blockade. And so the majority of all of the kind of the passengers who were on there, it was on the main kind of ship, the Mavi Marmara, which had around approximately 600 or so passengers, and on there was also journalists like Brother Jamal and a few other kind of news outlets that were there and documenting the journey and the process. And so the thing that we were aiming to do as a charity joining this was, again, to take in the aid. And here one of the key things was building materials, looking at rebuilding Gaza as well, something which has been banned. So building materials are not allowed into Gaza. Rather, they may allow some food and medicines in. So this was the key aim of it. And in fact, it's coming to an 11-year anniversary of the attack. It took place on the 31st of May, and we are in now the 20th of May. So in about 11 days' time, it will be 11 years of the attack. But what happened was, as the ship was making its way via international waters into Gazan waters, the Israeli naval kind of commandos prevented the ship from entering. And again, this was 11 years ago, so some people may not know, but if you just Google it, you'll be able to see some of the footages that did come out. And this is where the ship was stormed and attacked by Israeli commandos. There were a few helicopters, submarines, several Zodiacs, all coming in just to take on a civilian passenger ship where there was no weapons. It was just us with our bodies. And it was being attacked. And as they came on, they attacked. They also shot live ammunition, of which it resulted in the immediate deaths of 9 people who became shaheed. And a 10th one was later, after a few years. I think he was in a coma for several years until he eventually also passed. All of which were all were Turkish nationals. However, on the ship was many multinational people, people who are Muslims, people who are non-Muslims, and there was an array. There was old people, and there's also a baby on the ship. The captain's baby was also on the ship. Yet they came on in with and they kind of unleashed live ammunition. Eventually, it resulted in the ship being taken over, then basically taken to Ashdod, where we were paraded, and we were kind of the Israeli Navy were cheered for killing and injuring several of the passengers on the ship, and then the process went through where we were then taken into what we could say detention centers, prisons, and kept there. And obviously there was a international furor that was taking place. A lot of protests took place, and eventually we were then kind of released from there, and we left from there to Turkey. So that's just in a very quick snapshot, but it's an interesting story, obviously, of what they did try to attempt to do during the attack in itself, in terms of trying to block as much as possible the satellite feeds and the reporting that was going out, so they could control the narrative of what happened.
I mean, that's just shocking. I mean, a civilian ship coming with aid, humanitarian aid for Gaza, and an army storming it, opening up live ammunition
in international waters.
In international waters. I mean, that's piracy, isn't it? Sagir, is that piracy under international law? What was the fact that they could do that and get away with it? And 11 years on, no one's talking about it. I mean, the fact that human aid, that was one of your first missions to Gaza. That speaks volumes about the kind of work that you guys do. So may Allah bless you guys and allow you to continue doing it, because that's really something striking about Human Aid that I've seen that I haven't seen in many other charities. Is the stuff you guys do, it pushes the envelope. It's always thinking outside the box. If the border is closed, if something cannot be done, you will find a way around it. And in the world we live in, that's something that's really admirable. That's we really need to keep on doing. Jamal, you were on the flotilla as well. Any memories from that? Any stories you want?
Well, it was. There's lots of memories, not just one. For me, it was one of the most significant stories that I covered as a journalist. It was one of the first big stories that I covered as a journalist. And it's one of those experiences that you go through that do shape you, or at least leave a lasting impact. As Noor was talking about there, obviously, one of the most interesting things, and one of the reasons that I wanted to cover it, was that this was an attempt to essentially break the status quo, right? So you have this siege that's been imposed for, at the time, roughly 4 years. The world's most densely populated area, Gaza, huge shortages in terms of medical supplies, in terms of baby incubators, in terms of building materials, all of these different things. Obviously, Gaza had been obliterated essentially just about 18 months before, during the 2008 war at the time. So, I wanted to go on and report on this, because ultimately the idea was that if this coalition of civilians, a coalition of activists, some parliamentarians, humanitarians, and so forth, were able to defy the world's greatest powers, then ultimately that would set the precedence to be able to establish at least one outlet for the Palestinians living in Gaza to be able to reach a world. So from a journalistic perspective, a newsworthiness perspective, it was very interesting, and I wanted to cover it. Now, whilst we were on board, obviously one of the main, as a journalist, you start thinking, obviously, okay, how do you cover? What are the different things? You can't just sit on the ship and say, I'm here. You've got to look at different angles, and you also got to see where you think the story is going to be, so that you're constantly, setting the agenda, so to speak. So the understanding was that, Israel was not going to allow this. And if it wasn't going to allow this, what's the excuse that it's going to use? It's not going to use the excuse of anything aside from, ultimately the belief was that they would use the excuse that there was going to be weapons on board, right? If they get attacked, they're going to say there was weapons on board. So I did a report where I was given access to all parts of the main ship that we were on, the Mavi Marmara, which had roughly 600 of the passengers. Maybe we were about 40, 50 journalists, and the rest were either humanitarians like Noor, or peace activists, or there was parliamentarians from different countries, from ambassadors. There was the Archbishop of Sham, of the Levant. There was different people from around. We filmed, and it was very clear that there was no weapons, on it. The only thing was a few knives in the kitchen that were used for cooking, because you had 600 people there at sea for several days. Naturally, there was onions and stuff like that. We did that report, and that for me was very important, because I think that disallowed the false narrative that the Israelis then tried to spin. And we broadcasted it the day before, where I filmed myself as I was going through those things. And I think herein is an important part as a journalist, where I talk about the need for people to want to actually report the truth and not just regurgitate what is spoon-fed to them. A lot of what we find in terms of journalism, particularly in the Western world, or to be honest, anywhere, if it's about a region that they don't know about, they'll usually depend on either second source of information, right? So through other people who are looking at it, or on official narratives, without wanting to try and verify for themselves. And even if they try and verify for themselves, their sources for verification will be what they know themselves, okay? So when it comes to Israel, when we're talking about what's happening in Palestine, when we talk about the media bias, I do believe, and I'm not trying to take people, like, responsibility of people, but I do believe a large part of it isn't intentional. It is lazy journalism and ignorance. So people are told, and we heard it, for example, that famous clip that went viral the past couple of days with Mark Stone on Sky News, right, where he said it's only now he's saying that for years I've been going to Israeli authorities and asking them about investigations into killings of people, and they always say it's ongoing. Okay, so why did you not report on that before? If that was on any other country, you would have that reporter come out every week since the killing of a 16-year-old or the arbitrary detention or disappearance of a 12-year-old or whatever, say, report on it. And every day they would say the same way you hear about, and rightfully so, for example, political prisoners being taken in Iran or in China or in Burma, Myanmar, or wherever it may be. The point is that because that suits a certain narrative, you will have the journalists following it through. This doesn't necessarily suit the narrative, or there's this subconscious assumption that the Israelis are right, and therefore I don't need to chase up with them. Only when it became so blatantly obvious what they're doing now that we're hearing from them, something that we knew. So going back to the Flitzer, my belief was, and understanding the story, that they were going to try and spin this lie. So we tried our best to show the reality of what happened. One of the things that frustrated them the most, because when I was arrested by them, as we all were, and then we were taken into Bir Sabah prison, or what they refer to as Beersheba prison in the Negev. They took me for questioning for quite a few hours on both days. And I realized after a bit, because in the beginning it was just like, tedious questioning, a bit of intimidation and so forth. And ultimately I was very exhausted, and I just like, we've spoken, we've gone around in circles a million times. What do you want? What's your issue? Quite simply, just tell me what you're upset about. Let's know, And I was frustrated also because I never got any representation from the British government. I didn't see a lawyer. None of my rights were upheld at the time. And they were annoyed because, or one of the things they told me was, when we were doing the reporting during the attack, and I did one of the last reports that went out before they cut off the satellite transmission, I signed off as being in international waters of the Mediterranean Sea, which screwed with a bit of their plans, because the idea was they wanted to convince the world that this ship had entered into what they alleged to be their territory, or at least occupied waters. But because we were firmly in international waters of the Mediterranean Sea, and this was something that we stated as it was. And in fact, at the time of the attack, the ship had diverted away from going towards Gaza and was actually going towards Egypt, because it didn't want a confrontation, not least at night, which is when it happened. So again, and this, we've seen it today with Netanyahu, we see it with Mark Regev a lot, those who speak to the facts in a clear way with what is happening. Unfortunately, that it earns them the ire of Israeli authorities. And that's why, as a journalist, from my perspective, it's not about taking sides. It's not about favoring, it's not about bias. It is about looking for what the facts are. And the reality is the same way the facts were during apartheid South Africa. And anybody who is reporting on apartheid South Africa, had they not reported on the oppression that the blacks were enduring, and anybody of color was enduring, had they not reported on the rising calls for a boycott, divestment, sanctions movement against South Africa, and the fact that, for example, Israel was one of the last countries that continued to do business with apartheid South Africa, had they not been reporting on the Bantustans and the systems of systemic discrimination there, they would have been biased. It's not by reporting the facts that you're biased. It's by not reporting the facts, reporting what you wish the facts to be. The facts are very simple today, and this is why I'm happy to ever have this discussion if anybody talks to me about journalistic standards. The facts of the matter are quite simply, according to international law, Israel is an occupying power. According to international law, according to the most renowned humanitarian organizations like Human Rights Watch, Israel is practicing apartheid. According to fact by independent organizations like Medicine Sans Frontier and other humanitarian organizations, according to Israel's own human rights organization, Beit Salam, Israel targets children. Wherever you look at it, that's all you need to speak to. Just speak to the facts, report on them. With regards to the flotilla, it was one of the clearest things. There was an aid ship filled with humanitarian aid and supplies. On board were unarmed people. They were attacked in the middle of the night by Israeli commandos. Ultimately 10 people were murdered and killed. More than 50 were injured, many of them lifelong injuries. Israel kidnapped everybody who was on board that ship and took them to prison. They were in international waters. They were taken into prison, arbitrarily detained, ultimately forcibly disappeared, is what it would have been, because my family, for example, didn't know where I was for a good time. And then, due to pressure from the Turkish government, released them. Would we have heard that narrative being reported by media organizations at the time? I don't think so. We would have heard there was a ship going to Gaza. We're not quite sure what's on board. Israel says that they were armed. The Israeli government says that it is investigating them all. There is pressure from the international community. The United Nations will be gathering to discuss it, and that's it. Which, now, that to me is biased, because what you've done is you've chosen to sanitize what has happened. You've chosen not to include the reality of what's happened. You have not used the correct terminology that represents the truth of what's happened.
Exactly. Okay. Now so here, I want to talk to you about these things that now Noor and Jamal have both talked about real difficulties getting aid into Gaza. Not to the extent they can't get across the border, but the fact that they were attacked, arrested, imprisoned, just for trying to do their job as a journalist and as a charity worker. Now, we have this scenario where we have people who are trying to do aid work, trying to do the job, and they're stopped from doing it. In Syria, for example, we have people who are doing aid work and they are prevented from doing their aid work. They're criminalized for doing aid work. How do you get around the challenges that people who are doing aid work in Gaza might face? For example, if Human Aid were to send someone on the ground in Gaza and second them there for 6 months, is there a risk that they would be accused of being aligned with Hamas just because they're working in that area? And what could the consequences be?
Human Aid does work in Gaza, and when it has had difficulties, we've dealt with it, and we've passed those difficulties. We've dealt with those difficulties, and at the moment, Noor will confirm that we have a good relationship with the Charity Commission, and we have a working relationship going on, and so that's not an issue. But nevertheless, I think your point about risk is very important, and the risks do exist. And to be fair to the staff at the Charity Commission, the regulators, is that some of the laws that have been passed put them in a very difficult position as to how they look at the work of the charity sector, where the citizens happen to be Muslims in particular. And this brings into question, into the focus about whether we got institutionalized Islamophobia coming from within the law or the way the law is being implemented. So yes, there are issues there, and I have to say, sadly, that if a non-Muslim, just like Jamal was talking about journalists, they are seen to be impartial and seen to be doing good professional work with good integrity, whereas if it's a Muslim journalist, just like it was a Muslim humanitarian worker, they're dealt with real suspicion. And those of us who, like yourself and I, Fahad, work in the courts, work with the system in this country, we have to keep an eye on that. And we have to ask questions to the regulator. We have to ask questions to the courts, whether any institutionalizedly Islamophobic investigation or accusations that are made to a person in Britain doing work that a non-Muslim who was doing it would be treated differently and would be looked at in a much more let's say with much more respect. We have to challenge that as lawyers, and journalists challenge that as well. So those risks do exist, but nevertheless, that keeps our work cut out, doesn't it? So whether it's citizenships, like the kind of cases that you're dealing with, where humanitarian workers are being investigated, being deprived, but like I said, we work in the courts, and if we're able to present the evidence that in a fair manner, there are successes like the one you had recently with the case out the N3, isn't it? And equally with the charity workers, yes, there will be investigations. Yes, money will be stopped at airports. But when you make representations like we did and say, look, we're not going to let the British Border Police be an extension of the Israeli border police and be complicit in helping the Israelis to continue the siege of Gaza. We're going to challenge that, and after a period of time, we have won in these matters. So it's not impossible. It is difficult, but the important thing is to keep the challenges going and not to give up.
Jazakallah khair. I think Jamal needs to leave for work duties now. So Jazakallah khair, Jamal, for joining us. It's a privilege to have you on today.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Apologies. Wallahi, sorry.
No, may Allah bless you, and may Allah strengthen you to continue doing the work you're doing. You're doing an incredible job in exposing what's happening, and may Allah keep you safe.
I mean, of course, those on the ground, they're the ones who really are actually doing the lion's share of things, and they're the ones, if everybody remembers them in their prayers, inshallah, Allah yahfazhum wa yahmihum, and protects them all, inshallah. Thanks for having me, guys.
Okay, so we say salam to Jamal, and we'll welcome another key individual in the struggle for the Palestinian rights, Majid Freeman.
Salam alaikum.
Salam alaikum, Majid.
Welcome salam rahmatullah. Can you hear me, bro?
Yeah. How are you doing?
Alhamdulillah, can't complain. Just been listening to you brothers, mashallah.
MashaAllah. Majid Freeman, I'm sure many of you have seen his posts on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. He is one of the most prominent campaigners and activists on the Palestinian cause for many years now. And something Majid brings to the table, I guess, is unlike a lot of other aid workers, Majid is somebody who's traveled the world and who doesn't just give his pennies and his pounds, but he travels to the regions, he meets the people, and he sees the reality of what's happening. Majid, can you to Gaza, right?
Yeah, alhamdulillah, I managed to go to Gaza in 2012. It was part of a program called James to Gaza. So it was like a summer school, which we did for 2 weeks for the children down there. And it was just to take their mind off things, get them involved in some activities, like boxing, like sports, like how we have sports days here, etc. So it was a 2 weeks campaign there. And then we also got them to, after we built a bond with them, we got them to express themselves by giving them, because they were just children, so we gave them like some paper, gave them some pens, and just told them to draw whatever they wanted. Draw whatever you feel. And this was the first thing that hit me, because the first thing that we draw when we have a pen and paper down here is we draw, like the kids will draw clouds in the corner, sun, grass, trees, etc. The usual. But the kids down there, a lot of them, I noticed that some of them were like very unresponsive. They didn't always laugh with you when you tried to make them laugh and the rest of it. And the pictures that they drew explained everything. So they were drawing pictures of like a tank shooting towards their parents. Some of them were drawing pictures of fighter jets bombing their homes. They draw their parents laying down sideways. So they write mom, dad, so their family members who have passed away. And this is the first thing that comes to their mind when they have a pen and paper and they're asked to draw something. So the children, I realized very early, were traumatized by this war. And this was back in 2012. So alhamdulillah, it was a very eye-opening experience. I just read yesterday that some of the children who are being given some therapy for their trauma, many of the children who are going through the therapy, they got bombed yesterday. I think it was yesterday or the day before, and they passed away in the bombings. So these are the same children. It's horrific. It's horrific what we're witnessing.
When I went to Gaza just after Operation Cast Lead and 2009, I think beginning of 2009, and one thing that struck me with the children as well was you could see that glazed look across their eyes. You're speaking to them, but they're not even looking at you. They're completely traumatized. Yet there's the most incredible dignity. I mean, there's me and another brother. We went on behalf of the Islamic Human Rights Commission, and we had to document what had happened. And so we had a camera, and anytime you wanted to take a picture of them, they would get really angry. They'd stop you. I remember coming back and they were saying, "Where's the pictures? You don't have pictures of the kids." I said they wouldn't let us. They actually would stop us and say, "We don't want you taking pictures of us. We don't want your pity. We don't want your sympathy. We want your help." My sister-in-law had given me this sort of some bags of sweets. She said, "When you get to Gaza, just give it to the kids." And again, they were very, sort of upset by this gesture. And it's only when you explain that these are gifts from the children in London to you as your brothers and sisters, then they got happy. They lined up and they were just really politely taking one or two each. I was thinking, it's fun. Like, oh, the Eid parties here, you get rushed by the kids trying to take any
Yeah.
camp with you. And they had that sense of just pride in themselves. Everyone was, even though they've just been through a war, everyone's dressed really neatly. They've washed, they shampooed, they come out as smartly dressed. And I spoke to some of the parents, and they said this is part of our resistance. They want to destroy us, but we need to show them that we still live a normal life. We still will bathe. We have meals together. We get up. We come out. And I don't know if you had a similar experience with the kids when you saw them.
Yeah, it was very very similar. The children, what it is, the good thing was because we had 2 weeks with them, we managed to, like, every day we would be having breakfast, lunch, dinner with them, breakfast, lunch, dinner with them. So because this was going on for 2 weeks, at the starting they were very similar to how you mentioned, but then over time, Alhamdulillah, they got to know us better, and we got to know them better as well. That's when they started opening up a bit more, after we did some activities, etc. And you can't believe how mature they are for their age. Many of them, they're very, very much mature than I was at the time, and they were innocent little children who were like 8, 9 years old. And you couldn't believe what they had gone through. It's only I still got the pictures, I still got the drawings at my house. So when I go through, I was just going through my pictures the other day, and that's when I seen it, and I thought, wow, subhanallah, these were the children back in 2012. I wonder what they're going through right now. How many of these children are still alive right now?
Yes, and that's the issue. It's like generation. It's multiple wars. I mean, they live through war. Every few years, you have this conflict. And Noor, can I come to you briefly? Because you said you had that attempt on the flotilla to get into Gaza, and that didn't succeed. Did you get to go in later on after that?
Alhamdulillah, if you fail, keep on going. You'll succeed in the end, inshallah. Alhamdulillah, 6 months later, I did manage to enter. So, ironically enough, this was we were going through Syria and then Egypt and then Turkey, and this was just before the Arab Spring. But actually, in fact, as we were going through, I could just see all this stuff happening on the news about Tunisia. It was just baffling. Like, I wasn't understanding what's going on in Tunisia. Some that were there just before then, and when we did leave Gaza, we just left, and a few days later they had closed all the crossings because then Tahrir Square kicked off and everything happened. And so we're in Syria again just before the revolution there in itself started as well. But alhamdulillah, we managed to get in about 6 months. So it was about in January, right at the beginning of January 2011 is when managed to go. And just one of the things that struck me about just generally when you go to Gaza is you hear we know it's a country that's been bombarded, that war has been desecrated, it's the largest open air prison, all of those things. But like you said, you walk in, everybody's going about their normal lives. It's like and that almost gave a sense, and I was thinking that if you go to this country, this place, this land, you would feel maybe uneasy, nervous, bombs may fall, all of these kind of thoughts may go through your mind. But seeing the people, it just made you feel so calm. And in fact, once I did enter into Gaza, it was almost the sense of, I felt more safe and calm there than I did in the UK. And it was just like you said, that is part of their resistance, going about their normal day, normal life, continuing. Obviously, they've gone through so much difficulty, so much trauma, so much loss, but that is their dignity, and they're dignified people. And that's one of the key things, I talk about, and we do try to talk about, especially, from the human aid as well, which is that really, we are not, when you talk about charity, the giving hand is, the giving hand is better than the receiving hand. However, we feel that we're the giving hand in the charity. We're the ones giving the charity and they're receiving it. No, we're not. We're the receiving hand. They're the giving hand. How? Because through them we're able to fulfill certain responsibilities. Through them, they're the ones who are actually dignified. They're the ones who are standing against oppression. And in fact, we're the ones who are in the weaker position. And so for us being with them, we're the one gaining something, and they're the one giving us something. And that's the key thing that always struck us, which is that really these are dignified people. They are not people who are looking for handouts. They're not people who are looking for any of those things. And in fact, you know, the aid that you end up giving always ends up being just a drop in the ocean, really, of what is required, really, to really uplift the people of Gaza. However, one of the things they really do like is they were so happy to see us there. They were so happy, like Brother Fahd, I remember the video that you sent out before about protests, you know, just even protesting, just even standing up.
I'm gonna have to hold you. I think we've got a call coming in, so let me just take the call.
Hello, Assalamualaikum.
Assalamu alaikum. Who's that? What's your name?
Walaikum salam. It's Jahan, bro. How you guys? You guys all right?
How are you doing?
Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. Yeah, nah, I thought I'd give a quick call, saying some amazing stuff. Jamal, bro, Jamal, like this guy, man, alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. The amazing work you guys do with this guy, man, alhamdulillah. This brother, like, see some stuff he'll square up for people like me. Like what happened in Egypt. And with Gaza, I didn't know he was on the flotilla. The journalist been arrested as well, and obviously we know these Israelis everything a journalist is the least of the laws they're breaking. The kind of stuff these guys do. But yeah, quick question, please, for Majid. Assalamu Majid, how you doing, bro? Good seeing you, man.
You okay? Alhamdulillah, bro. Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah, bro. Well, I know you went Gaza and then you've been Syria and you've been to a few other places, all within legally and everything. Well, just wanted you to just speak, because this is like different areas of the area of Sham. And these people, we know the land is special. We know these people are special. These people, these are our brothers, our sisters, our children. And when you directly spend time going past to different areas, doing aid work, some of us are aid workers. So we spend some time in maybe one place or another. Alhamdulillah, Allah has blessed you being able to go and do aid work in a lot of areas. Like what do you feel from the people, the feeling you get and the love? Because I think Brother Noor touched on it as well. It's like they're the lucky ones. We need them rather than they need us. If you could just touch on that, please, because
I was just
if you don't mind.
Just about an hour ago. Okay, so this is going to be like a breaking news alert. Breaking news alert, yeah. So at the moment, the latest news is that the Israel Security Cabinet has voted on an unilateral ceasefire, inshallah. So we're not sure when, but there should be a ceasefire soon, inshallah. We hope so. And we're praying for the safety of the people on the ground, because what usually happens is before a ceasefire, that's when they go crazy with the bombings. In that last hour or last 2 hours, they try to smash everything up as much as they can just before the ceasefire is implemented. So, sorry, I was saying just about an hour ago, I was speaking to some friends on the ground in Gaza, and they said that all of a sudden they just had to, they were in the middle of editing a video for me. They were translating it, putting some subtitles on from some families that they visited, etc. And they live on the front lines in Gaza. They live in Khan Yunis, which is, so when you come in, if there is a ground invasion, that is usually the first place that they have to go through. So that was what was getting bombed. They got a warning message to say the whole area was about to get bombed, so they all had to evacuate immediately. So so they messaged me to say, we're really sorry, we were midway through editing the video and we can't edit anymore because electricity is gone. We can't charge the laptop now, and we're having to move elsewhere. So everyone, imagine if you just try to visualize it, the people on your streets, the people on the street next to you, everyone all of a sudden leaving the house with one rucksack, with whatever they could fit in there, and everyone just leaving, not knowing if they're going to come back to the house or not. Not knowing if the house is going to be bombed, or not knowing if they're going to reach their destination safely with their parents, with their kids, etc. So this is like we hear stats, we hear this many children killed, this many adults killed, but when we try to visualize the situation, humanize the situation, put ourselves in that situation, subhanAllah, it's horrifying what they're going through.
SubhanAllah. I think you're right, Majid. In all wars Israel is involved in, it's almost like they're trying to get, it's like a kid playing a video game and he's saying time's up and just won't let go of it because it's that addiction. But in their case, this addiction is to ethnic cleansing and slaughter, which is what they do. I wanted to get a flavor of the life on the ground in Gaza, something that we don't get from the media. Noor, you mentioned something that really struck home with me and with anybody else I've spoken to about Gaza, is that when you enter Gaza, it feels like home. And it's such a strange feeling. When we went, we had to break the siege as well in the blockade. And this was before the actual convoys had started. So it was just two of us, and we had certain ways we had to try to, methods to use to try to cross from Egypt, which may not be legal, but I shouldn't say as a lawyer. But when we were in Egypt, the people who were helping us there kept telling us, you're going to be in difficulty when you get inside. We had the UK embassy and the Irish embassy warning us about going inside, saying you could be kidnapped by militant groups. You could be. It's bizarre. You had 3 weeks of devastation, which over 1,300 people were killed in Israeli bombings and Israeli attacks, and you have the embassy of this country telling one of its citizens that the danger to him is not from that. The danger is from militant groups kidnapping you. It's just bizarre the prism to which they look at threat. But in any event, as soon as you cross in, it's like this no man's land, and you walk in and it's just this empty sort of immigration area, and all of a sudden this immigration official came and he had a long beard and he came out and he gave us a big hug. And he thanks us for coming through. And everyone we met, as you said, they thanked you. I mean, we went into the masjid and you had police officers coming, praying next to you. And I know if a police officer prays next to me in London, I get a bit scared. I get a bit afraid, as in, why is he, even if it's a Muslim police officer, why is he next to me, right? And here you guys coming, they're putting their weapons down and they're just, Allahu Akbar, they're praying next to you. And it's such a strange feeling. You almost feel like you are home and these are people are an authority that will protect you, that will look after you, and they're on your side of things. With the people as well, when you went to people's homes, so we stayed in a hotel the first night, and I can't remember the name of the hotel, but it was the one that the journalist home was staying as well. And when I looked at the window and it all smashed through with bullets, and everything was like the receptionist was showing us where they'd attacked it. So I didn't feel that safe staying there anymore. So we went to a brother we met. He said he'd come stay with me. So he took us to his home, and it was just him and his dad was shaking. His siblings no longer there. So just him and his mother, and they lived in this house. And I'm telling you, this is January 2008. It was freezing cold. They had no heating, they had no electricity. It was so icy cold. Him and his elderly mom, and they took us in and they started giving us whatever blankets they had. They gave us, we had sleeping bags. They said, no, you have to take the blankets. They took out this food, and it was like this tin, those tin with chicken and stuff, like the processed meat. So they had taken that out, and a friend of theirs came to visit, and he saw the food, and he goes, oh, because what's the special occasion? And then we realized that they had taken this out specifically for us. And just because that person said, what's the special occasion? They gave us everything. And it was embarrassing. I seen the next morning, like at Fajr time, his mother coming down, and she's like probably in her 70s, and she's making wudu. And when I met wudu in that water, it was ice cold. And for them, it's just normal. And I think, subhanAllah, this is where they're showering, this is where they're eating. And the biggest thing, smiles on their faces. And they said, it is a victory for us that you are here. For us that you have come here, that's a victory. Other people said to me, as I mentioned in the video earlier on, that you were on the streets in London. The support was that is a victory for us. Stuff that we trivialize, we sometimes don't see the benefit of doing. It might be trivial to us, and it might not take much effort from us, but for them over there, it's huge. It's a sign that we are one ummah, that we are together with them. And I'm sure you have spent longer than you've had more experiences. If you could share stories, both of you. I'm going to start with Noor and then come to as well.
No, it's the same thing. It's the hospitality. You get the hospitality, the smiles. These are normal people. You know, sometimes, like I said, we paint a certain picture, and we are moved by the emotions because of the fact that, you know, the bombs are dropping, and you know, our love for our brothers and sisters. But similarly, what happens is the moment it falls away from the news headlines, it falls away from our memories and our forefront of our minds. And it's really important to understand these are just, you know, these are our brothers and sisters. They have their daily lives and they're going about their lives. And the sense of resilience, the resilience they have is amazing. And we see their sacrifices being amongst the most ultimate types of sacrifice that they're offering. However, you know, like I said, they become so happy when they see us just speaking out, by writing, by protesting, by coming and even visiting, because they understand the risks that are involved in all of that. And the fact you've been willing to do that, it gives them the courage to say that they're not alone. And that's one of the things that, you know, really helps. That I'll give an example. You know, the flotilla. It's just an example. The moment it was attacked, we were now then taken into the prisons. You know, at that time, everybody started to kind of feel a bit down. You know, we've just got, you know, attacked, so many people injured, some people killed, we're in prison, and we don't know, we're cut off from the world. But the moment we got wind of protests that were taking place, and that some of the news footages got out, the morale goes up. Why? Because we know you're not alone. You know, and that's such an important thing. And that in its, you know, that incident just made me understand so much more how it's important that when people are suffering and going through hardship, that they understand and they know that they're not alone. And that in itself gives us the support. And that's one of the things that we can really provide to our brothers and sisters, is to basically stand in solidarity with them. One thing we do try and do is obviously the aid work. But even if you put the aid aside, just standing in solidarity, to speak out for them, to be their voice, you know, these are such important things, and that really do help them. It really lifts their morale as well.
Majid, do you have any more stories about how you found the people in Gaza? Just in terms of how do they see their future? Is it like, okay, we've been bombed now, and then next year we're going to be bombed again? Do they see a way out of this?
I remember in my short space of time whilst I was there, I actually graduated from the university in Gaza, literally. So what, there was a graduation happening there, and because we were helping with the kids and the rest of them, they said to us that, you know what, even you're going to graduate with us. So I'm like, what do you mean? They gave me the full gear. I've got all the clothes, everything still here. They gave me the hat and everything. I got called right at the front on stage. I graduated in the stadium in front of like hundreds and hundreds of people. Alhamdulillah. And they really, really value the education. No matter what they go through, they don't let it put them down. They don't see themselves as victims. They get on with it. They take the education extremely important. Like even one of my friends, his daughter, who's 18, I was speaking to just the other day. They're still in Gaza. Their English is better than ours. They really, really like take it seriously, because they understand that they all have a responsibility to be a voice, be an alternative voice to the Zionists. So if they are well educated, well spoken, they can get the message out for the people in Gaza. And I remember I also went, prior to me going to Gaza, I went to Aqsa as well, alhamdulillah, I got a chance to go. So even in the West Bank, they all kept saying the same, that whatever you guys are doing in the West, we can see it down here. You guys coming down here, even though after you go, we carry on getting bullied by the Zionists down here, but it don't make a difference to us, because you guys continue coming, it gives us a big boost. So again, we have to continue going whenever we get an opportunity to go, to show them our support. Not just like even protests, etc., makes a difference, but going there in person, you will find that they won't take a penny of you. They don't want any money of you. It's not a financial transaction. Just you being there physically, they will explain the importance of the Holy Lands to us, importance of Masjid al-Aqsa. For us, for me personally, they sent me back as ambassador and said, we've relayed the message to you. Now you need to go back to your communities and inform and educate them on what we've told you today, so you can pass on the message to the others.
You know, what you just said about how they're looking for the ways to change the narrative. I got that with the kids. Everybody wanted to do something. What do you want to be? I want to be a journalist so I can report about what's happening. I want to be a doctor so I can work in a Shifa hospital and help the people. I want to be an engineer so I can rebuild the country. But at the same time, they said the Israelis don't want us to grow. We build and they destroy. We build and they destroy. Well, I mean, when I was there, we saw even the animals in the zoo were shot. Like, it wasn't a bombing in the zoo. They went and they took them out, point blank range. They shot animals in a zoo. They destroyed playgrounds, museums. So there was this sense of that they want to completely destroy any purpose of our life. We will live in this.
To try and dampen the morale. That's why they kill the children. They know they're killing children and women, but they do this to dampen the morale, or try to dampen the morale, and to demotivate the people, so that the people give in and the people say, just stop. But everybody knows what they're doing. Like, even today, someone was saying that if you calculate the statistics, the percentage of how many women and children are being killed, that means that we know, and they will know as well, that if we send this bomb right now, there's a 50% chance of either women and children dying. Not just women and children, even when men pass away, when men get killed, they become shaheed, that doesn't mean that the men are fair game. It's just the women and children are innocent and the men aren't. Because what does this mean? So many of the men as well, the elderly, they're young, but that doesn't mean that everyone is fair game or the men are okay that they passed away. It's just the women and the children. So even this, we need to take control of the narrative again. And I've been learning a lot myself during this round, because I've seen a lot of other friends and other activists taking control of the narrative in all aspects. And I think despite the billions that the Zionists spend in their marketing and their PR machine, they're being defeated in every aspect.
Majid, you mentioned something, and I want to ask. I know you need to go soon, so feel free to sign out when you need to. But the question, Majid said that people, they get very happy when you go and you visit them, and they see that as a sense of solidarity. People traveling to Al-Aqsa, people traveling to the region. I've had this discussion with a few people who will not get involved in campaigning. They won't put any social media, post in their social media about Al-Aqsa or Palestine. They won't do anything about Palestine. The reason why is they go, we don't want to be able to be stopped from visiting Al-Aqsa. So they say, the one brother, he goes to Al-Aqsa every year. He wouldn't go to a Palestine conference. He is so paranoid about them finding out about him being at anything to do with Palestine that he's going to basically stay away from all of these issues, so it doesn't jeopardize visiting Al-Aqsa. And he's saying, they want me to come. That's my solidarity, is me visiting them and being with them and praying in the masjid. So if I do this and the Israelis won't stop me, so how do we deal with that?
Just tell them whatever is written is written. I know so many people who maybe, for example, person A has got sent back because he's known or he's associated with person B. Yeah. So they're saying this person B is so hot, you know what, because you know him, we're going to send you back. You can't come to Aqsa. And then person B goes, person B is allowed to go in. So you can't worry and overplan all these things. Whatever's written is written, it's going to happen. Yeah, because we might not participate in such activism or etc. down here in the UK because we're planning to go next year. What if that next year never comes? So this whole year you've just wasted in not being involved in so many opportunities to get involved in goodness because you thought about a plan that you had in the future. But that plan you had in the future, if that Israeli soldier on that day when you go there, it depends on their mood, they could send you back regardless of how many precautions you've taken.
And also, I think there's a point that going to the masjid in a way is for me. For me to pray in the masjid, it's a reward for me. It's a personal thing for me. But to me to pray in an occupied masjid, or to me to fight to liberate that masjid, what's more important and what's more beloved to Allah? And perhaps you fighting for the liberation of that masjid is so pleasing to Allah that Allah will facilitate you to actually pray there in a liberated Al-Aqsa, inshallah.
Inshallah.
It's just, I think it's about changing the mindset. It's really, really important. Majid, yeah, I'm going to come to you. I'm just going to let Majid go, inshallah.
I'm going to have to go. So Jazakallah for having me on. Inshallah, may Allah accept it from all of us.
Ameen.
Assalamu alaikum.
Yeah, Bismillah, Nuri.
Yeah, I think just on that point about not doing something, you know, just so you're aware that, you know, after the flotilla in itself, I'm actually banned from going to Masjid al-Aqsa because obviously you have to go through the Israeli checkpoint. So I've never been, and I won't be able to go. But alhamdulillah, there's no regret in the actions, that's been undertaken in order to do that, because it's important that you still do your utmost, whatever you can, because we are all accountable. Allah will ask each and every one of us, what is it that we did within our capacity? And so we should be able to do whatever it takes. And like Brother Majid said, whatever is written is written. Whether you'll be able to get access or not, you won't be able to. So inshallah, I make dua that in my lifetime, the Masjid al-Aqsa is liberated, and I'll be able to go and pray under a free Masjid al-Aqsa. And I think, we should never belittle any action that we can take. Every action, every small action we can take, is something that, number one, is a means for us to at least present to Allah that this is something I've tried, something I put towards it. So that's an important thing. And secondly is that it does help. There's many actions we do that it does help in the overall struggle that our brothers and sisters are undergoing, because they're the ones who are suffering the most on the ground. So the least we can do, from the comfort of our homes, with the roof over our heads, with the clothes on our back and the food in our stomach, is able to do some things. And that's the key part, that we continue and we persevere to do our utmost. And Allah will ask us, did you do your utmost? And that's the key part that we need to really focus on. And that's why solidarity is really important. Alhamdulillah, this recent kind of attacks has really brought about a lot of emotions. And again, it seems very different to previous times. It seems very different. I'm not sure how it seems to you, Brother Vad, but it seems very different how it was before. And there's a shift taking place. However, my concern also is that, as Brother Majid mentioned, there'll probably be a ceasefire soon. Okay, if the ceasefire then comes in, does that mean we're going to forget the brothers and sisters? And that's what happens. Rather, no, we continue, remain in solidarity with them, and we continue to support them in the difficulties they're going through, and the oppression, and to be alongside them, in every way that's possible. And that's the key thing that we should be doing.
Yeah, no, Jazakallah khair. I mean, we're coming to a close now, but I think the key points that you've just mentioned is we can't be reactionary. We can't act based upon what the mass media decides to show us. We know that what was happening in Gaza didn't just start with the attack on Masjid al-Aqsa. It was happening before that in Sheikh Jarrah. And subhanAllah, I saw a video someone shared on social media of a boy making a video diary of settlers in Sheikh Jarrah and how they had taken his home. And he showed how American tourists came and they were mocking them and showing them how they were taking more and more land in that village for them. And I was really taken aback by this video. But the most shocking part of it was that the video was from 2010 or 2011. So this is like about a decade ago this video was made. And it just shows you that this has been going on for at least those 10 years, if not longer. I'm saying something people don't recognize, that the people being forcibly removed from that land now in Sheikh Jarrah are people who were forcibly removed from other places, from their homes, their main homes, their ancestral homes in 1948. And they then moved to Sheikh Jarrah. And so something we have to do is we have to, in the long term, equip our community, equip our supporters with factual evidence, as Jamal mentioned, with the history of the conflict. So it's not that, history doesn't begin in May 2021. History goes back a bit further, and we can show the background to what's going on. And I think that slowly is happening. The fact that Jamal mentioned, they are being called out for their apartheid, for ethnic cleansing. These are obviously terms that they don't like, but they're being used by the mainstream now. It's not just a fringe group talking about this. This is you can only withhold the truth for so long. I mean, it has to emerge, and that's happening, step by step. I think that's something that we have to equip our people in the correct terminology, in the language, and and the truth is on our side. We just have to learn it. And you guys, mashallah, you guys carry on doing what you're doing, supporting the resistance in the way you're supporting it. And make no doubt, brothers and sisters, when you give your money to Human Aid or to any other charity working in Gaza, what you're doing is you're not just donating it to put a plaster on a wound. You're rebuilding infrastructure. You're rebuilding strength. You are showing your solidarity to those people, showing them that you're not alone. The complaint that, oh, well, I'm going to do it and then do it again. What if it's your home, right? I mean, what if your child breaks your laptop, right? I'm not going to get another laptop because the child's going to break it again, right? You're going to get another laptop. Your phone breaks. You get another one. It doesn't matter because you need that. These people need homes. They need infrastructure. They need schools. They need education. And Human Aid are doing that job on behalf of all of us. Because if they weren't there, they weren't taking the risks. And you've heard Brother Noor talk about the risks that he personally took when he's on that flotilla. You know, not many people will do that. People are happy to stay in the comfort of their homes here and just click a button. But you see, there are people doing that on our behalf, risking life and limb, with soldiers jumping on board a ship that they're on with humanitarian aid, being detained, arrested, taken to prison, and banned from visiting Masjid al-Aqsa. But they're taking it for the team, so it's up to me and you to support their endeavors. Because if we can't even do that, then really what hope is there for us? What response do we have to our Creator, the King of Kings, the one who controls our destiny? What answer do we have on the Day of Judgment to Him when He asks us, what did you do for your brothers and sisters in Gaza? So please, when the appeals come in, don't hesitate. Don't think about Ramadan's past. Think about whether you'll even get to next Ramadan. And donate now as much as you can, because the need is now. It's not going to be in a month's time or 2 months' time. Right now, the destruction, the devastation is happening, and they need to have their homes rebuilt. Please donate whatever you can. Jazakallah khair, Noor, and for all the Human Aid team and all our guests today. I feel very inspired after hearing all your accounts, and may Allah give you more strength and sabr and keep you guys safe, inshallah.
I mean, just before we leave, just one thing I wanted to share as a means of maybe motivation. So my 12-year-old daughter, she is obviously very moved by the situation that's unfolding in Gaza, and so she wanted to do something. So she had from some money of her savings, she wanted to donate that, and then we had that discussion. Okay, what is it that we can do? So alhamdulillah, we put our heads together and we've managed to come up with there's actually a website now, but what we've done is we've managed to design and procure pin badges, basically. So this is one of several different designs of pin badges. There's 3 different ones of the shape of Palestine, one of a ribbon, and also there's new ones that are now being procured, being designed of the Dome of the Rock, Masjid al-Aqsa. And so those pin badges are there. We've got a website. It's called Pins for Pal, PINS 4, the number 4, pal.com. And there you can basically purchase these pin bags. And the aim of that was that my daughter pushed for is that, look, one is that it shows solidarity. By wearing a pin badge, you're showing solidarity with your brothers and sisters, raising that awareness. And secondly, all of the proceeds, all of the profits from the sales of this will be going towards the humanitarian effort and relief in Gaza as well. So, she's something that, she wanted to do. We worked together and we've come up with, and she's trying to do her bit to raise, again, solidarity and raise some funds. So, again, we can all try with our children, with our families, to see, okay, what is it that we can do to try and support our brothers and sisters in Gaza, in Palestine, in the overall struggle that's there. And so that's a really important thing that was done. So please, again, I would request, by all means, those who can, those who are watching, please do go. It's just a website we made very quickly. It's got some badges on there. Inshallah, you can buy it. It will come out to you, and the proceeds will go all to the charity, and you can wear it with pride, inshallah. It's pinsforpal.com.
MashaAllah, I think everyone needs to go on and buy some presents for everybody, because it's not just a donation. When people start wearing the badges, it's solidarity, it's a trend, and more people show their solidarity with Palestine this way. And for kids, it's fantastic, MashaAllah. It's something that you'll all want in their class in school. So may Allah bless you and your daughter, Brother Noor, and may Allah increase you in all the good that you're doing, inshallah.
Ameen.
So thank you again for hosting this, and for all our viewers for watching, inshallah. Please, the ceasefire has been just announced. That doesn't mean that we hold fire in the efforts that we're going to put in to help our brothers and sisters just because it's often used doesn't mean it should be out of your heart. Please remember the brothers and sisters in your dua, most importantly, and help them rebuild their lives, inshallah. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.